It's time to look at Bond 6 to 10. In the last episode, I looked at Bond films 1 to 5, and I focused mostly on Sean Connery's performance and how important that was. How, as he got tired of the role, the standard started to slip, and how they started to focus on Bond cliches rather than some of the better elements. And after 5 films, Connery quit. So this week I'm going to look at 3 different actors playing the role. I'm going to start with number 6, On Her Majesty's Secret Service. Now this film is way too long. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes long, which means it's about 40 minutes too long. Most Bond films feel a little bit long. They all push that 2-hour mark. And especially some in this era where they were going for something more of a singular adventure. It would have worked better with an hour and 45 running time. You've still got time for all the big things, but if you're not going to really develop any character or overall plot, it's just too many action scenes. So, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, directed by Peter Hunt, who had been an editor on some earlier films, and he was trying to do something a little bit different with the films. He didn't want to just copy the Connery films, so he's deliberately directing the new Bond differently. Now, the new Bond was George Lazenby, who got the job because he had played a Bond-like character in a commercial. And so he looks the part and he can do it in moments, but overall I was really disappointed with his performance, and that's mostly because I'd just seen 5 Connery movies in a row. It goes for a slightly more realistic film compared to something like You Only Live Twice. It tries to go much closer to the book than any of the others had, trying to downplay the size and scope of some of the films. That's why they chose On Her Majesty's Secret Service for this one. And because they saved a bit of money on the star's fee, they could spend that on a few extra action scenes or a bit of extra special effects. And so it just drags, and Lazenby doesn't have the charm to make you want to follow him on this journey. The movie brings back Blofeld, but this time played by Telly Savalas, who is great, but would have been great as his own villain. After you've seen so many different Blofelds, you finally see him in You Only Live Twice, and now he's changed again. They do play with the plastic surgery element, and there are a few jokes about recasting Bond right at the beginning. There's a joke to the camera completely breaking the fourth wall.
This never happened to the other fella.
There's a joke from M straight after the title sequence. I don't think he needed either, really. And even in the beginning, some of the fight scenes, Peter Hunt was an editor, and yet he's directed as if he's ignoring editing. Some of the scenes just have these great big jumps that lack the continuity of a decent fight scene or a decent action set piece. It's cutting out that brief moment of escape, actually, making it unrealistic that he did escape. But there are good elements to this film. Diana Rigg is pretty good. She's an interesting Bond girl, much better than some of the ones that follow in this period. The story plays with this. USA can't really get involved because of real life political issues of Vietnam, so they don't really go after that. And they criticize the UN, can't really protect the West, so it's down to Bond and this Britishness clinging to a sense of British strength, even though in the film it's actually a group of others who save the day, and Bond is sort of tacked in there, going against the Britishness actually, so it's not even really British, it's just Bond saving the day. It's interesting watching this now as the story is about biological weapons, so it's added an interesting view of it when you're stuck in quarantine watching it. And Savalas does well with a pretty ridiculous plot, but he actually exposes Lazenby's weakness. There's a scene where they share a conversation. Blofeld reveals some of the plans, but not all. And Hunt had actually brought in another writer, Simon Raven, to add some quality to this scene specifically. And it shows in Savalas, but Lazenby just doesn't have the charm. If you compare this with the Bond versus Dr. No scene, where Connery does really well, here it just exposes Lazenby's weakness. And Lazenby actually blames Hunt for this. He said he didn't get enough direction, he didn't get enough help considering his lack of experience in acting. Hunt denies this, saying they have meetings every day, but Lazenby he struggles coming off of even Connery's weakest performance. But then you get to the end where, spoilers, Bond gets married. And as they are driving off on their honeymoon, Blofeld's sidekick, Irma Bunt, kills Tracy Bond. And it's actually a really nice sequence, taken pretty much from the book, where they have Lazenby holding Diana Rigg in his arms, and Bond says, "We have all the time in the world," which was made into a song for their love montage, sung beautifully by Louis Armstrong. The movie is long, but it's almost worth it to get to this point. It's a powerful scene, one of the most powerful in all of the Bond movies, and it really adds something to Bond as a character. So that was made in 1969, and then in 1971 we have Diamonds Are Forever, and Connery is back. It took $1.25 million and 12.5% of their profit, which in a budget of $7.2 million is a huge chunk, but it brought Connery back. It also was a promise of 2 projects of his choice, only one of which got made, a Sidney Lumet movie, but it was worth it, really, because Connery comes back and he swaggers into the role. It's not a barging thing, it's not a showing off thing, it's like he's just easing back into the role that was always his. You've got a brilliant song bringing back Shirley Bassey, you bring back Guy Hamilton to direct. They're really going for the Goldfinger elements of this movie, and it almost pays off. It's pretty good compared to the overly long On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and it's much better than Connery's weaker films. And we have the end of Spectre in this film, Blofeld, this time played by Charles Gray, who had already played a character, the one with the metal leg, in You Only Live Twice. So the continuity's gone, and they never mention his marriage. This is just after, in real time, his wife has died, and they just never mention it in this movie. Whereas in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, Blofeld hadn't recognised Bond. This time it's another play on the plastic surgery element and hints at, oh look, Connery's back, but not nearly as obvious as the hints that he'd gone in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. This one's set in Vegas, so it's big and it's beautiful, and some of the scenes in the casino, some of the weird scenes, they're pretty good. And the plot is simple. It's just a diamond smuggling thing until you've got the Blofeld satellite gun thing that's absurd. It starts off, and they even comment on how simple it really is. The beginning, it's Bond interfering in American issues with diamond smuggling from South Africa. It's strange that Bond is there, and that's actually mentioned when Blofeld is threatening the world. He even comments, "I've not threatened your little island."
Your pitiful little island hasn't even been threatened.
In the previous few years, the last of the British Empire had disappeared, and you can see that Bond is now like forging his way into a world that doesn't really need British heroes. But one thing that had always lingered was this sense of British cool, British style, British culture, and that's what Bond brings, especially in a place like Las Vegas, which is such a quintessentially American place. He comes in and he's cool. He's the only person at the craps table in a tuxedo, and he just plays this idea of old-fashioned cool against this aggressively business-like cool of the USA and Blofeld, who is anything but cool, escaping dressed as an old lady, but he represents one element of that British opulence. They have the character Willie White, played by Jimmy Dean, who represents Howard Hughes, who was actually a friend of Albert Broccoli's, but he's another wealth madness that Bond is juxtaposing. Issue with this film is the homophobia. They have the 2 goons for Blofeld, Mr. Kidd and Mr. Wint. They're a gay couple. Apparently they'd even convinced Connery that they were gay in real life, and they are played to ridiculous lengths. There's a moment on a train where Mr. Kidd mentions the Bond girl, Jill St. John, is attractive, and they share a look, and it's just an awkward moment. It's one that the Bond films had tended to avoid. They'd played this no need to mention homosexuality because Connery had played Bond so straight that it was never a question. If you think about the scene in From Russia with Love, where there's a briefing of all the people who work at under M, and they're all perfectly straight, short-haired, tuxedo-wearing white men, all look like Bond. There's no need to mention it because it's obvious in the image. But the books had this element of homophobia throughout them. There's even an element in the books where Bond was more liberal than maybe he acceptably would be in that position. But this is the first time where we're really seeing a sense of homophobia in the aggressive masculinity of Bond. And there's only a couple of moments of inappropriate action with women. It's much more leaning towards the superhero seduction rather than the creepy element. There's the bit with the bikini, which is uncomfortable to watch. And there's violence towards women in these couple of movies that, again, it's uncomfortable. But it could be much worse, and it will be much worse in the Bond movies. So overall, you're happy to see Connery back. He plays it well. There are a few good elements. It doesn't feel nearly as long as on Her Majesty's Secret Service. This is not back to Goldfinger level, but it's better than where it had gone. If a bit cheap, a bit simple. There's the moment where Blofeld should obviously just kill Bond and doesn't. There's the joke use of the tape, the girl being dumb, focus on her ass. There are moments where the action is good though, like you see Bond moving slowly because shit's difficult. You compare that to, say, Casino Royale where they're doing parkour. I'm okay with these moments, but then it goes to shooting without any danger of being shot, like you're facing stormtroopers. So this is a hit and miss one, really. I wish this added a thread throughout of Bond being in mourning after the death of his wife. That would have really added to this one, but they avoid it. Next, number 8. In 1973, Guy Hamilton returns with Live and Let Die. But, once again, Connery quit. They had broken world records for a fee to bring him back. They offered him a pay rise, and he said no, he was done. So they brought in someone who they'd considered from the beginning. And they'd especially wanted, after You Only Live Twice, but due to commitments with the TV show The Saint, Roger Moore had not been free. Now he was, and he filled a role that he'd been considered for all along. They have Tom Mankiewicz writing again after he'd written the previous movie, and this time he adds a Black Panther element, and they've gone for the Black Crime Syndicate of Harlem in Live and Let Die. It's a confusing tone they've gone for with it. I'm not sure if it's anti-Black Panther, anti-Black culture, or if it's celebrating it in a blaxploitation way, or just trying to make money off that. It's really confusing. And one scene is particularly prescient to that, when Roger Moore takes a taxi up to Harlem and walks into the Filet of Soul club, and you're just looking around and all these cool black guys, and Roger Moore so stiff, so British, so smug. You start to think, fuck this guy. It's not a positive scene for Bond. He's supposed to be walking in like nothing scares him, and he's like, this feeling of, you should just get out of there because you're making other people uncomfortable. It's not a good scene for him. The whole film doesn't really work. Roger Moore is awkward and he walks too slowly. He's lighter but stiffer. It's just a strange way of playing it. They're going for more fun, more funny, more like the books, but Connery had done it so well that it's hard to compare them. But you have a black Bond villain, you have a black Bond girl. There are elements of this that work. You have the voodoo element as well. There's these moments where you're thinking, do they even care about this? Do they even want to show it correctly? Are they just exploiting these black cultures and themes? There are moments that I really do enjoy. Some of the voodoo elements are really cool. Yaphet Kotto's villain, Mr. Big, is good. He does well with it, considering how lamely written it is. He complained afterwards about how badly written it was, and he really tried his best to make it meaningful. I mean, the fake face is weird looking, but there are elements of it that did really well. This is completely let down by the ending. Oh my, the ending is awful. You have yet another Shark Tank, and you have this terrible gadget, and you have this disturbingly lame way to get rid of the villain. Even though he has these cool sidekicks, I really like the character of Whisper. I don't know why that works so well. You have Teehee with his hook. You have Baron Samani, who's really cool. But then you have this terrible ending, and then this long scene afterwards to get rid of Teehee, who for some reason is still bothering, and it takes ages to show. And there are other elements that are just disturbing. The introduction of Sheriff Pepper, I don't know why they've bothered with this. I think it's because they're showing Southern America, especially Louisiana, and focusing on the black element. Opens with this sinister murder during a fake funeral, but it's really cool. The dancing is fantastic. It's a really cool thing, and I think to offset that, they've introduced this clearly very racist Louisiana sheriff as some comic relief, and it's just uncomfortable to watch. You've got this pretty cool boat chase. It goes on for a long time, but you've got a world record setting boat leap, which is pretty cool. But they add these elements, and Roger Moore is not good enough to pull it off. He's too stiff, he's too awkward, he's just changing Bond in these ways that are not good to watch. Next, the following year, 1974, what many consider a low point in the Bond franchise is The Man with the Golden Gun. Again, Hamilton returns to direct, and again, $7 million budget, no absurd fee for Connery, so that goes on a lot of sets and special effects, which is pretty good. And the previous movies had been making decent money, slight decline, but decent. This one ended up making 97 million globally, which is pretty good on a 7 million budget, but they'd been hoping for a little bit more. So the receipts showed that this was a bit of a dip in quality, and that comes across in a lot of different things. There are positives to it. I love Christopher Lee. Who doesn't? His assassin is pretty cool. I quite like Knick Knack. Hard to watch without thinking of Mini-Me, but if you watch it for itself, he's a positive character. I mean, he's a villain, but he's played pretty positively. He knows he can get around. They obviously kill him off in a way reflective of his height, but before Saramanga is killed off, Knick Knack is a pretty good character. And Saramanga himself, they take him from the book, The Third Nipple. It's played for laughs here, it's just weird. But he plays it well. He's a good actor. The sets, the locations are fantastic. A lot of East Asia. The problem is that they go for this far-off exotic thing that no one will understand, and it's really confused. They're mostly in around Macau, near Hong Kong, and Thailand, but they bring in so many different elements from all over Asia. They have sumo wrestlers outside a Thai temple. They have a karate dojo in Thailand. They go to a kickboxing, which is by far the best scene. Again, it's Bond talking to the villain. These are some of the best scenes in these movies. And here, because it's Christopher Lee, they play it well. Bond has a gun on him. He can't say much, which is good. But they really just don't care about accuracy with the Asian elements. There's one moment where there's two girls speaking Chinese, and it's just sentences on a loop. It's not even a real conversation. Bond in this is, again, it's lame. It's going for that Roger Moore different thing. Funnier, but he's not funny, he's harsh. Jokes are at the expense of people, and he's not charming. He was 45 when he made the first movie, so he's already way older than Connery ever was. And it's just uncomfortable the way he interacts with women. And it comes across as a little bit like racist, you know, his quip about it being a grisly land. It's not comfortable watching. I mean, the plot is relevant to the time. It's about the energy crisis, but it has this even pre-70s notion of East Asia. They've tacked on all of this Asian stuff, which is not in the book. It's in Jamaica. They've added it because of the popularity of recent kung fu movies like Enter the Dragon from Bruce Lee. So they wanted to add some kung fu to it just to make some money, and they've just shat all over it. It's really not done well. And to bring back Sheriff Pepper, just throw him in Thailand being really fucking racist to all of these Thai people, calling them
You pointy heads! Cotton pickings!
Pointy heads, little brown pointy heads. It's really uncomfortable to watch. For him to show up and just be gross, still chewing his tobacco, spitting it everywhere, just being a disgusting human being, it's not good to watch. And the fact that the movie cares so little about Asian culture as well is not good to watch. Despite Saramanga, there's no characters you like. The Bond girl, Britt Ekland, I like her, but here she plays dumb blonde, and she just makes so many mistakes. It's absurd to watch, and again, they focus on a girl's ass being important to the plot in a silly, ditzy way, and it's cringe-inducing. One element I really did like, though, was some of the set design. The shootout in the sort of funfair element of Saramanga's home is really cool. I really enjoyed some of the images there. The beautiful islands, of course. Thailand is fantastic. Unfortunate that now they call that island James Bond Island. And the use of the HMS Elizabeth, again showing British global weakness here. It's not that important. It's an old relic. But to put MI6's base on there, create some really cool sets. Some German expressionism with Roger Moore walking through. It's an interesting image. It's a cool scene. It really adds to what could have been a very boring scene of exposition from M, who was Bernard Lee just going through the motions at this point. I think he was unwell in the filming of this one, and it shows. So despite a cool actor playing the villain, nice to have an assassin as the villain for a change. A cool prop. It looks awful, really, but that's because it's made of bits. So it's actually a cool idea. It's a play on the Q element. Parts of it look great as long as Roger Moore is not in shot, because he's not good. He has that awful smile in the M scene. Again, he hurts women, and Bond doesn't pay his debts. He's no honor in this movie. The child on the boat is right. He helps him. He owes that child 20,000 baht, and what does he do? Push him out the boat. Bond is a dick in this film, and it's not okay. The way he treats Ekland, yes, okay. She's rubbish, but he's not good with her. He doesn't help. And of course, she has one moment where you think, yes, she is good. She rejects him. He's disgusting. Of course, 2 minutes later, my hard-to-get routine didn't last very long. It's so disappointing. And then you have this really uncomfortable scene, which Ekland plays quite well, but it's just not comfortable to watch. Next, film 10, The Spy Who Loved Me. Now, The Man with the Golden Gun had been Harry Saltzman's last film. He'd had other projects that lost him a lot of money. He was suffering from depression, so he wasn't able to continue working with Bond. He had debts. He sold his share for, I think, 20 million. Broccoli continued on his own. This, along with some legal discrepancies about the ownership of Spectre, meant there was a gap. There was 3 years between The Man with the Golden Gun and The Spy Who Loved Me. And I think that helped the audience. A lot of the movies had been coming back to back or 2-year gaps, and it was starting to feel stale, starting to feel old. Q was getting predictable in his ridiculousness. So you needed something else. And another thing that really helped was the budget. They increased the budget to 13.5 million. That's almost double The Man with the Golden Gun. And it paid off. They made almost double. The Man with the Golden Gun had made 90 odd million. This one made 185 million. It got decent critical reception, and there's a few different reasons for that. One of those key ones was the opening. The ski scene, now an iconic image of Bond skiing off the mountain and opens up to a Union Jack parachute. This helped Bond go from British hero to British legend. This was the turning point where Bond can do whatever he wants. And that's because they get this moment right. He skis off and it goes silent. And then the Bond theme starts when the parachute opens. It's a really well done scene. Almost killed the guy who did it, but it works really, really well. If you compare this to the great stunt in The Man with the Golden Gun, where the car flips 360 jumping over a river. Again, stuntman did it first time, absolutely fantastic. But what did Guy Hamilton do? He added a slide whistle. Loses the effect, but you add a slide whistle, it becomes absurd. If you do it in silent, extra slow motion, like here, it really, really works. And then the car lands, start the theme, perfect. Don't let Pepper say anything. That guy should shut up. But here, it works really well. They timed it well. Lewis Gilbert's the director this time. He'd done You Only Live Twice, and he does this moment really well. There's also stealing from other genres. They've done blaxploitation, they've done kung fu. Now they just take disco. So it adds to a bit of the soundtrack, but it doesn't obscure the plot or take the plot in ways that became unrealistic. They completely ignored the book. Fleming had insisted they don't use the plot. He didn't like that book. They could only use the name, so they made an entirely new plot. It's a copy of You Only Live Twice. I'm going to start a war between the USA and the USSR and be king of the ashes. And the villain is okay. Carl Jurgen does well. It's an interesting idea, this maniac who's super rich. They've done it before, but with a different element. The key here in this movie is the Bond girl. They get Barbara back to play a Russian KGB agent, Triple X, and she does really well. She plays Aggress Bond well, and that's despite Roger Moore being kind of creepy, kind of inappropriate, and really misogynistic. There's a whole scene where Triple X Anya can't drive the truck, and he's just making quips. He's just making inappropriate, misogynistic quips. It's really not cool. It makes you think she should have shot him at the end, which was a good element to add, this actual conflict between them, but then, of course, he charms her. Another thing they add is Jaws, who is easily done so badly. It's not too bad here. The biting of the neck is dumb. He should just kill them with his giant hands. Save his jaws for biting through chains made of licorice and other shows of strength like that. He doesn't need to kill everything. Like biting the shark, that was cool because you can't punch a shark to death biting the shark. Okay, fine, it's absurd as well, but Richard Kiel does it pretty well. But they'd really gone for Bond to be less Connery here. He's more like the books. He's great and funny, but he's not. His sleaziness here gets him in trouble. There are two moments here where he's actually distracted from his surroundings because of his pursuit of women. The scene where he's searching for an informant and he's distracted and almost gets shot. For some reason she saves him. That's absurd. She sacrifices herself. Later again, he's distracted by wanting a woman, doesn't pay attention, gets himself in trouble. And the treatment of women here, it's been coming through the last 5 movies. It's no longer a sense of Bond wanting to bed these women. Of course he still does. But the way these are filmed now, this is hinted at in You Only Live Twice, but it's clearer in these 5 movies. It's now become voyeuristic. There's plenty of peeking on them in the shower. They are clearly naked through the steamed glass or warped glass. There's posters of naked women on the submarine in this movie. They spy on Anya in the shower. In Diamonds Are Forever, they'd cast a Playboy bunny as one role, and she's basically naked in most of her scenes. It's become this 1970s voyeurism that's more uncomfortable than the earlier films, which had this almost 60s free love element to it. Of course they want to fuck Bond, because women can fuck whoever they want now. Now it's, she is there to be looked at rather than even to be fucked. But this movie, it's uncomfortable to watch Moore doing these things. He's not got that Connery charm. It's a stiffness. So despite a Carly Simon song, and despite Jaws working surprisingly, and despite the opening scene, and a villain listening to classical music, which is always a good touch, it just doesn't work. They spent over $1 million on a new soundstage. Amazing. They need Stanley Kubrick to teach them how to light it because it was so ambitious, and so the sets at the end are great, except they just feel like the volcano layer. There are elements of they've gone for a more 70s look, curves and things, but just feels like they're running out of ideas. This was hailed as them returning to form. It's because they're copying the 60s movies, just tacked on some 70s elements like disco and voyeurism of women and chrome decoration. So despite the success of this movie and the critical reception, I did not really enjoy it. So it could be bias because of listening to other people saying Connery's the best, or because those were the first movies I'd seen apart from Pierce Brosnan's, or a connection with Connery and his other work. But comparing the three actors, there are a few scenes that really pick out the difference. Now, the reason I don't like more, apart from this smile, it comes across in his first movie, Live and Let Die. And it's easy to compare this with some of the scenes from the earlier movies. He's checking for bugs in a hotel room. He goes into a hotel room, he does his spy thing. And if you think about this movie, it's totally different, and it takes away so much of the coolness of Bond. He finds the bugs but doesn't really do anything about it. He takes a bath, which is weird. I don't know why that's weird, but to me it's just weird sitting in a bath. Shaving, of course, Sean Connery's Bond must have done that too, but it's weird to see, I guess. He has a fear of snakes. I know Roger Moore really did, but I mean, just film it with a fake snake. But Bond shouldn't panic like that. He shouldn't have to flamethrower a snake. He should just grab it and break its neck. He's rude to the room service. I know it's actually Whisper, who's one of Mr. Big's henchmen, but he's rude to him. I mean, Bond wouldn't be. Then the girl comes in and he treats her like crap. Compare that to the way Bond effortlessly wanders around searching behind pictures for bugs and laying his little spy tricks to check for infiltrators. He's just doesn't play it well, and the way he moves is just so stiff. Compare that to the cool walk of Connery. Even Connery dangling in Diamonds Are Forever, he gets into a Las Vegas skyscraper by rappelling and hanging from wires, and still Connery does it in this really cool way. And then you've got Lazenby in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, where he can't even imitate an academic. They have to dub his voice. He can't go up against a good actor playing the villain. Even a smaller villain who becomes his father-in-law, the interaction there doesn't feel nearly as Bond as Connery does. He's slightly swayed by the idea of money. The shift to getting what he wants is clunky and awkward. The accent, some Australian accent, peeks through occasionally. He just walks with this swagger that isn't the cool stride of Connery or even the stiff correctness of unwavering Moore. It's an awkward walk that doesn't fit. It just doesn't compare to Connery. So these movies, they're slightly less creepy in a direct way, but there's a lot of voyeurism. They're more racist even than some of the others in a lot of ways. Watching them as a modern viewer, there's lots of awkward moments, there's lots of boring moments. There are moments I really like, there are iconic moments that you love, but in general, the turn towards more is a negative one. So, my top three so far, it's not changed, it's still Dr. No, From Russia with Love, and Goldfinger, though the ending of On Her Majesty's Secret Service is great, the opening of The Spy Who Loved Me is great, but overall, these movies are not good. All of these movies have a lot wrong with them, but there are elements that you can like in them. Live and Let Die has some cool elements of black culture, especially the Louisiana scenes. Tasteless in some ways, but some of it's not. It's confusing. So I'd say the worst one is going to remain You Only Live Twice. Next time I have more, but the fifth film next week will start with the brief stint of Timothy Dalton. So, if you want to hear more of what I think of these movies. Please like and subscribe, and we'll see how I feel about the next ones.